I've been coming to the Story Slam for about a year and a half, and I have come to know a lot of you. I'd like to know some of you better. Some of you probably know me better than you'd like to. But most of you probably don't know that I'm a painter. And I had become actually pretty adept at painting. But the paintings that I did were not like the ones hanging on the walls here. I got very, very good at painting very, very small things. I was involved in a miniature wargaming community, and I painted tiny figures that were about an inch tall. And I got very good at it using tiny little brushes that had one little hair on it to not just paint the eyeball, but paint the pupil of the eyeball and get the iris in there. And it was hours and hours of time for things that were microscopic in nature. After doing this for years, and people started approaching me, asking me if I'd paint their figures and asking them to do commissions, I became aware of a competition. And the competition was an iron painter competition. So it was bracketed. You would be paired up against one other person, and there would be a theme, kind of like Story Slams, and you had to match that theme and paint something within that theme. But beyond that, your creativity was unlimited. You could use whatever you wanted to. You had to create something within that theme. And then one of those people would move on to the next level. And many of the painters who were in this competition were professional painters. This is what they did for a living. But I decided to enter. And the first theme that was given to me was my hero. Kind of like my biggest fan. That's the tie-in case you're not paying attention. So I thought about it, and I looked at all of the little tiny miniatures I had, and I had this tiny little goblin who came with a banjo. And I thought, what kind of hero would a guy with a banjo have? And I'm looking through everything else, and I realized that the one with a whole lot of work and alteration could look almost like Elvis. So I took this big, burly, beefy guy who was holding an enormous hammer, and with tiny little tools, tiny little sanding and filing and working, I gave him tiny little sideburns and gave him a tiny little cape. And I made it look like Elvis had lived and had become really jacked up and beef again. And I built a diorama where Elvis was nailing an Elvis poster on a tree to promote his next concert. Built an entire swamp around it with tiny little pussy willows and different plants around there. And remarkably, I used a stick to become part of a tree, but I painted the stick black so I could repaint it to make it look more like a tree instead of a stick. It was this whole thing. Spent hours and hours and hours on this for weeks and weeks. And I made it through that first round. I won the My Hero level of this competition. So I moved on to the next level, and the next theme was Cold-Blooded. And they announced it, and then they announced our pairings, and I went and I looked at the back catalog, the previous paintings of the person I was paired against, and my heart sank because I realized there was no way that I could beat this person. I could make a 1-inch figure look realistic. She made it look more real than real life. She was able to make it look like there was actually light emerging from something when there was no light in there. Her work left me flabbergasted, but still I decided to try. So I worked on this cold-blooded mural, and it was in a sewer, and there was a fish woman thing, and there was somebody else getting ready to attack them, but her babies were there, so it was cold-blooded on multiple fronts. And I worked on it, and it was a week before our submissions were due, and she posted a message saying, "I'm sorry, I've been really busy, I can't finish my piece, so I'm just going to not finish. I give up." I could have just taken that and won and passed on to the next level of the competition, but I was devastated because I'd spent all this time working, wanting to at least show well, if not beat her, and I wanted to see what she did. So I wrote to her and I said, "You can't not finish. Find the time, do this, you can do that." And we started this whole dialogue back and forth, and I kept on sending her these crazy images of like, if you don't finish, I'm going to submit this. and it was a picture of an ice cube with just some paint on it. And I will win with that. You have to finish. You have to finish. I admired this woman so much that I was egging her on so that she could beat me. And about 1 minute before midnight on the night that we're supposed to finish, she did submit her entry. And while my entire entry was maybe 9 inches long by 5 inches wide, an entire diorama, she built an entire diorama that was about the size of a quarter. And hers was of a princess holding a frog, getting ready to kiss it, holding a hammer in her hand, with a pile of dead frogs behind her. I've never been so happy to lose a competition in my life.